You're listening to A Book with Legs, a podcast presented by Smead Capital Management. At Smead Capital Management, we advise investors who fear stock market failure. You can learn more at smeadcap.com or by calling your financial advisor.
Welcome to A Book with Legs podcast. I'm Cole Smead. I'm the president and a portfolio manager here at Smead Capital Management. At our firm, we are readers and book junkies. It can be said that leaders are readers, and we believe books provide us a great source of information for filtering what is and isn't important for us as investors. Investing is the last great liberal art and the best way to spend a lifetime of learning. This podcast is for readers, thinkers, business-minded people, and investors who want to grow their knowledge from great authors and their writing. Charlie Munger often talks about using multiple mental models and analysis. Our aim for this podcast is to help listeners test Munger's theory in business, markets, and people. Investors and people we run into often ask us what books we're reading on our reading list. And we thought about putting something out, that people could look at. We decided to talk about what is on the Smead book list instead, and we will continue to do this quarterly. Joining me to talk about our current book list is our Chief Investment Officer, my dad, Bill Smead. Dad, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, and it's always fun to talk about great books.
I'm excited to talk about what we are reading. So to get us started, Dad, let's go over anything you just read and what were any big ideas you drew out of those books?
Well, I read Disorder by Helen Thompson, and she does a very deep dive into the oil business, the connection between worldwide oil production and geopolitics, and pretty much lays a very difficult set of circumstances out that now, obviously, many months after she actually probably wrote the book, it play out right in front of our eyes. And then also I read The Bond King by Mary Childs, which was literally a walk through memory lane for a guy like me that started in the investment business in 1980, about the time that all the things were developing for PIMCO and Bill Gross.
I read The Bond King as well. You're right. I really think of it as a picture of the bond bull market of the last 40 years. We actually just got done recording a podcast episode with Mary Childs on The Bond King, which will publish on July 25th for podcast listeners to enjoy. The other book that I just got done, a few other books that I just got done reading was Boom and Bust by William Quinn and John Turner. We actually also recorded a podcast episode with them that's going to air on June 27th. What I really took away from their book is you can look back hundreds of years, and any time you take interest rates to very low levels, it always wreaks havoc when the financial euphoria of those periods end. And I think they do a wonderful job of talking about bubbles that we know of, and like the South Seas bubble, for example, but then also less known bubbles that Americans might not be as familiar with. A couple other reads of mine recently, Electric City by Thomas Hager. It's the story of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and what Henry Ford wanted to do there to make it effectively the new Detroit. That collides with the federal government. What you learn from the book is when the federal government and business collide, the government wins, and very interesting to think about for what we see today. High Noon by Karen Southwick, which is the story of Sun Microsystems. Over the history of business, there are different seasons at each company, and the people and the needs that are over those seasons change each season. And she does a great job of talking about what that was at Sun, and is interesting to think about for each individual business. And then the last one I had recently read was After the Romanovs by Helen Rappaport. Helen she's one of the foremost historians of Russian history. My big idea, and it's kind of funny to say this today with what's going on, post Ukraine's invasion, the Bolsheviks took the assets of wealthy Russians in the 1920s. Today, it's the democracies of the West that take the assets of the wealthy Russians, and just interesting to think about that the juxtaposition of then versus now. So, Bill, let's pivot to what you're currently reading. What titles are you currently working on?
Well, I'm reading All About Me by Mel Brooks, and Mel Brooks is literally one of the greatest writers of entertainment, television, and movies of the last 60 or 70 years. And it's great for us to think about within the context of our interest in Warner Brothers Discovery, and what does matter in that world? Is the content what matters? Is the writing what matters? Is the acting what matters? Or is it what someone looking at data decides? And then the other one is C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, which is brilliant. Cole's mentioned Munger a lot. Munger says to invert, always invert. And C.S. Lewis was brilliant by writing a book written from the standpoint of Satan and his demons and how they try to ruin your life by invading your space.
Yeah, my current two reads are George Hearst by Matthew Bernstein, and George Hearst is the father of William Randolph Hearst, who we obviously know was a big media mogul and had a lot of wealth and power in the United States in the early 20th century. His father was pretty much a nobody miner in 1850 in what was then Nevada City, kind of outside of Sacramento today. And within 80 years, his son was one of the most powerful and wealthy individuals in America. So it just reminds me that there's a ton of opportunity in this country, even over 100 years ago, and you could change the legacy of your family greatly in an 80-year period. The other book that I'm currently working on is The War That Made the Roman Empire by Barry Strauss. If you've ever read Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, his book starts from the history after Caesar was killed and what happened with Augustus Caesar, also known as Octavian, and Mark Antony and Cleopatra. It's a very good history read. I'm not done with it, so I can't really draw anything out of that. So, Bill, lastly, have you had any books recommended to you recently, or ones that you've bought and you're looking forward to cracking open?
Well, we had a recommendation from a reader of the podcast to check out How the World Really Works, the science behind how we got here and where we're going by Václav Smil. It looks like quite an interesting read on its face, something we'll have to check out.
That's awesome. Let's see. A couple of books that one that I bought and I haven't got open yet is 20th Century Fox by Scott Eyman. Like you mentioned on Mel Brooks, we're really interested in the movie business history because of, through Warner Brothers Discovery, we now own a movie studio. And so just trying to pick up as much business history in the movie studio. 20th Century Fox was the setup of really today's modern movie studio. So that'll be interesting to get into. Some books that we're aware of that are coming, and we're really interested to see these books get published. George Gilder's newest book, Life After Capitalism, is going to be launching here in the fall. I think it's in September. We just did a podcast that'll be launching on June 13th with George on his prior title, Life After Google, which I'm looking forward to with listeners. A couple others, Connie Brook, who wrote The Predator's Ball, all about Michael Milken and Drexel, which obviously Bill had worked there in the 1980s. She's publishing a new book that we're aware of and don't know the working title, but interested to see what Connie's going to write about because she's a great author. And then the last one that we know of is Daniel Schulman, who wrote a book that I read called Sons of Wichita, which is all about the Koch brothers and how their family got to where they are today. He's working on a new title as well, so really interested to see what Daniel brings out. Bill, thanks for joining me for this to teach our podcast listeners about what's on the Smead book list. For our listeners, if you have a great book that you'd like to recommend, email podcast@smeadcap.com. That's podcast@smeadcap.com. It could get a shout out next quarter when we do this again, which would be fun. Thank you for joining us for the Smead book list on a Book with Legs podcast. We look forward to the next episode.
Thank you for listening to A Book with Legs, a podcast brought to you by Smead Capital Management. The material provided in this podcast is for informational use only and should not be construed as investment advice. You can learn more about Smead Capital Management and its products at smeadcap.com or by calling your financial advisor.